Hey, it's 2.3 and this video is all about structure. So jot down some notes in the must-do portion of 2.2 step 3. First of all, how is this literary aspect defined? Well, structure is the interesting ways that a book is organized or a piece of literature is organized. So how is the book told, how are things put together? How does one part work with the next part? How are they all stacked up on top of each other? Hopefully in a way that they won't fall on the little kitty. Yes. In this book, there are a few structural aspects that are interesting. First of all, the organization of section and chapter. So you'll notice that each section has a Roman numeral and a name, and then each section has chapters that are numbered. The use of a non-chronological timeline is important. Offred goes back and forth in between the time before and the time now, paragraph to paragraph, right? And that can be really confusing as we read the book. It's an important way in terms of how the book is structured. And then the repeated night section chapter, the fact that we have this repetition, and it's a section and that this section called night is repeated, and each time it's repeated, you'll notice there's only one chapter. And so it's different than all of the other sections that have, that are only have one, are only named, how do I say this? Their names aren't repeated, and each section of the others has multiple chapters, not just one chapter. Okay, and then there's one other thing that we're going to learn about in the last chapter called historical notes in terms of structure that adds a whole nother level of analysis. Don't worry about that yet. All right, so let's talk organization here. In the first, or structure, same diff, yeah? In the first 7 chapters, we have these sections. There's a Roman numeral for each, and a name for each, and then chapters for each. And then there's really 2 different narratives. One is what's happening to Offred right now as a handmaid, and then what do we hear about from the time before, either before Gilead's creation or just before right now, right? The book opens up 5 weeks into Offred's new position at her 3rd placement. So anything that happens before that is actually a flashback, or at least not in the current timeline. And so it would be non-chronological. So here are some examples, and if you want to use any of these for your should do examples on the following page, you sure can. But you also don't have to write all of these down, okay? So the first section is Roman numeral 1, named Night, and you can see there's only one chapter, and it's the first nights in the Red Center. The Red Center is where the handmaids are indoctrinated into their role as handmaids, and specifically Offred describes her time there with Moira and other girls who she names, or women who she names at the end of the chapter. And it's run by Aunt Lydia. So whenever we hear about Aunt Lydia and something Aunt Lydia said, it's going to go back to these days in the Red Center. All right. Okay, so the second section, Roman numeral 2, is called Shopping. And this section has multiple chapters. So you can see we've got 3, 4, 5 chapters in this section. And the things that are happening in the current timeline are routines and position in Commander's house, including shopping. Commander's wife is described. She sees Nick, talks about Ovglen and the journey to the shops, their shopping trip. They meet Pregnant of Warren and the Japanese tourists. They visit the wall and see the dead bodies. So all of these things are happening in the current timeline. But these things are also mentioned in this section, and these are memories that Offred has. She's got a flashback to her first meeting with Serena Joy. So Serena Joy is in the Gilead regime. It's not, she's at this point, actually we'll hear about her in the time before, but not yet. So it's not the time before Gilead, but it is before right now. All right, before the 5 weeks into the stay at the new placement. All right, we also hear about her, remember about previous freedoms and trivial conversations with Luke. Okay, and then the third section in the first reading, Roman numeral 3, is also called night. So we have our first example of the repeating night section chapter. And once again, it's only one chapter. This time it's chapter 7. And what's going on? She is alone lying on the bed, time for reflection and thinking about the importance of telling her story. And she remembers Moira at college and her mother as a feminist activist. So this is the kind of thing you're going to be looking at when you're analyzing structure. And what you have to decide is, what are some of the effects of organizing the book in this manner, where we are learning about these things that happened before the current timeline and giving us this non-chronological narrative, the repeating night chapters, and then why she might organize, why Atwood might organize it into these sections with chapters within. So what are some effects of this literary aspect? Here are some ideas. The non-chronological aspect of the structure parallels Offred's thoughts, which are like anybody's thoughts, right? They jump around all over the place. That's stream of consciousness. We don't think in a linear way as humans. We think about one thing, our brain is triggered by something else we see or hear or smell, and then we think about something else, and then we think, hey, why am I thinking about this? I don't even know how I got here, right? And so Offred does a lot of that as well. And so it can be frustrating and confusing because as a reader, you want to follow a linear pattern, and sometimes it's circuitous or, all over the place. But it does parallel, a real person's thoughts and how this one person gets through each day. The distinction between the sections with the Roman numerals and names and the chapters with numbers, I think, reminds us that Offred is trying to organize her thoughts and experiences into something that makes sense to her, at least so that she can last, right? So she can survive. By the time we get to the end of the book, we'll find out something else about that, and just know that there is some more information coming in historical notes about how the chapters and sections are organized. The repeated night section or chapter, I think, creates the feeling of being stuck in this world, right? Because she keeps coming back to it, right? She is still once again at night, having gone anywhere, not having escaped, not having done much of anything except survive. But maybe at the same time, those recurring night chapters function as a reprieve from some of the horrors and monotonies of her daily Gilead life, where she has little to no control over anything. Because in her night chapters, she can have a little more control about what she thinks. Of course, she's affected by memories, and she's affected by what's happening around her now. So, having imaginary thoughts about flying a unicorn or something like that isn't going to really help her. So they're maybe not as much fun as they could be. But it is somewhat of a reprieve because at least she has some control. She has some agency over what she's thinking about during these night sections. All right, then we need to think about our connections to theme, right? So the first theme that we're tracing is the power of voice to create truths. So her story that she's telling us is from her voice. And so she's creating these truths for us. She is telling us, she's choosing what to tell us. Even though she has little control in the Gilead world, it is all from her point of view. And so when she comes back to the night chapters, that's for a reason. She wants to be able to come back to that moment of autonomy and personal agency where she can control her thoughts and decide what she's going to remember, what she's going to focus on. Resisting oppression like a girl, maybe that goes hand in hand with what I just said, that she can try to resist the oppression of Gilead. She can try to subvert their control over her by controlling how she's going to tell her own story, the order in which she tells it, what she chooses to remember, and what she chooses to focus on. Innocence, guilt, and redemption. You maybe have noticed that we don't hear a lot about her daughter, at least so far in the first 7 chapters. She's only mentioned twice, and the first time was really tangential. The second time we hear a little bit more about her in the night chapter, but in both occurrences, she isn't named, and there's not a lot about the daughter. So I think there is some guilt there. I think Offred has some guilt about having lost her daughter, even though she knows it's not really her fault. She's been told that it is her fault, that she is an unfit mother. And so that's got to give you some guilt, even if you understand it's not true, especially because everyone in her world believes it's true. Who is innocent in this book? How might that connect to structure? Does anyone get redemption? Is anyone forgiven? Does anyone fix something enough that they, should be absolved from the wrongs that they've committed? And how might that connect to structure? Story and imagination as creative forces is our last theme. And for this one, I think, again, with structure, the way that Offred is choosing to tell her story, and that she gets to use her imagination to recreate it for the reader, is her way of gaining some agency. It is a creative force that sustains her, allows her to survive, allows her to last. And you'll watch as we keep reading for references to her changing the reality of things and to making it, instead of reporting exactly what happened, to giving us choices, a variety, options of truths, and how that might tie into this theme and how that connects as well to the structure, the way the story is told. All right, thanks for hanging in there, and I look forward to talking to you about this literary aspect in our Jigsaw groups.